Well, as we found out from those results, Britain is becoming less Christian, less white. According to the census, less than half the population now call themselves Christian, according to that latest snapshot of the changing face of the country. This is England and Wales, I should add. The picture in Scotland may differ slightly. The picture in Northern Ireland may also differ. Meanwhile, the number of people identifying their ethnic group as white has fallen by about 500,000 since 2011 to 48.7 million, according to the ONS figures, which carries out that census, of course, every 10 years. Polish remained the most non-UK identity, followed by Romanian and Indian. The study also showed that white British people are now a minority in England's two biggest cities. So the wider question here, what does being British mean today? Naomi Smith is Chief Executive of Best for Britain. Naomi, afternoon to you.
Hello, Ian.
So, nice to have you with us. So, things are changing. We know that much. Every census through the years seems to sort of show various changes in different ways. Firstly, what do you make of this? And what do you think being British means today?
Well, as somebody that was born in London, raised in Northern Ireland, went to study in Yorkshire, is a Scottish heritage, I've always loved the fact that we are a diverse nation, a nation in no small part built on immigration, whether they've been people marrying into our royal family or the children of immigrants now running the country for us, and many non-white people holding positions around the cabinet table. I think that's brilliant. And I think British values are about welcoming those from different backgrounds. It's about democracy, the rule of law, all the things that you were talking about before. And I think we're very lucky to be a home to so many different kinds of people. It would all be desperately boring if we all were the same. Yeah,
I think the last point there, I think most people would agree on. But simultaneously now, I mean, it's possible, isn't it, to say, do you know what? It's not about racism or some mad xenophobic vibe. It's just there is a British culture, and that culture is changing. It's changing. The demographic is clearly showing that in terms of the amount of white people, in terms of Christianity as well. So even agreeing with what you've just said, you could simultaneously wonder about your culture and possibly be concerned. If you followed this direction of travel, we might be talking in 100 years' time of a picture where there are very few white people or white Christians around.
Well, I think on the census point, I think one of the interesting things from it was actually about the rise in people who claimed they had no religion. And that's a trend that has been happening around the world, not just in the UK, over time. And that, of course, has an interplay with our constitutional arrangements. You know, we're the only country in the world, apart from Iran, that has clerics legislating in Parliament. We're the only country in Europe that has Christian collective worship in schools still. So there are a whole host of questions that raise about how we should be running the country as a consequence.
But that's a good point, though, isn't it? Because some people like that, and they think that's a good thing because they like the Christian values, and there is a sense that, well, you know, what if that starts to disappear? What if that starts to go away? Then what does that mean?
Well, I think that if you've got more and more people who are irreligious, it becomes less and less viable to impose the doctrine of one particular religion on everybody. And it should surely be a matter of choice. And those that want to opt in and opt out of those processes should be able to do so. I think that's just a very practical point that most of your viewers would agree with. I think on the point about people feeling things are changing, I think most people understand that change is a good thing. If we hadn't changed, you know, we'd still be without Wi-Fi, would still be without cures for terrible diseases, living in mud huts.
That's true, but I think
it's about how change is managed.
I get that, Naomi, but I think there is a sense that some people, I mean, it's always a bit tricky, isn't it? If a black person says, you know, I'm really proud to be black and I like my backstory, I like my roots, they may be Nigerian, they might be Caribbean, whatever they happen to be, you know, and I like the fact that this is my country and, you know, I've moved elsewhere, but my backstory, I'm a very proud black man. If you said I'm a very proud white man, that has very different connotations.
I think what we're talking about is actually something coined interculturalism. We often hear about multiculturalism, but actually interculturalism is a very important part of making population change work. And it's about having an acknowledgement that successive governments in the UK of both shades, Labour, Conservative, even coalition, have failed to plan for population growth. They've had a very laissez-faire approach to migration in a way that other countries, and notably Canada, hasn't. Canada's governments tend to take a much more activist approach to immigration. So when people arrive in Canada, they get given access to free education classes so that they can learn English quickly, and I think in some areas French. That would be great if we were able to do that in the UK, help people assimilate, to be part of their communities much more quickly. And I think their neighbours would then find it much more easy to cope with change in the environment that they perhaps have grown up in.
Do you think people really do assimilate in some areas? I mean, if you take Islam, for example, if you look at areas that are heavily Muslim populated, and I always talk about Blackburn being this, example where Panorama made a documentary a few years ago. There were the sort of the white indigenous people living that part of town, and the newer Muslim community living that part of town. There was no real mixing. Nobody bothered each other, by the way. There was nothing. There was just no relationship between either group.
Well, I think you can just look to the current cabinet of the government that we've got today to see how well some migrant families have managed to assimilate into British society and reach the very top of the executive making powers within our structures of our body politics. So, of course, there are areas where much more could and should be done. And I don't think it's necessarily fair to blame those coming from somewhere else.
I don't think it's about blame. It's just a reality of what happens, isn't it? I mean,
it's natural to want to go to people that understand what you're saying and can help you get involved in the community that you've moved to. I think what is fair to say is that governments haven't played their part properly in helping people assimilate. They haven't built enough homes. They haven't ensured that there are sufficient increases in public services in areas that do get more migration. And that's just as true for rural urban migration of British-born people to other parts of the country as it is for immigrants coming from elsewhere into the UK. So the government just needs to do a lot more, learn the lessons from Canada, be more activist.
All right, be more like Canada. Yes, I can see that goes down like a lead balloon with some. Naomi, thank you very much indeed for that. Naomi Smith, Chief Executive of Best for Britain. Let's talk to David in Glasgow. We're going to talk to Ben Harris-Quinney from the Bow Group shortly as well. David, what are you thinking? David, hi.
Hi, Ian. You well today?
Very well, thank you. Fire away.
Good. Yes, I think over the years we've seen in the UK the decimation of industry. Steel, coal, shipbuilding, all these kind of industries. Oil and gas is still hanging on there, but nothing like what it was 20, 30 years ago. Now, all these industries were absolutely vital to every part of the UK because it wasn't just work. Yeah. They created a social element, social clubs, all these kind of things were there. Now, because these industries have gone, people are then hived off into individual activities or very minor activities. And then when you look at the migration element coming into that, I remember in the 80s, my first experience of tasting curry. Never tasted curry before that, because people came across, we welcomed them, we went round and had meals with them, and they were having different types of food from what we were having. Yeah. And this was an experience for us and an experience for them.
So that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, great. It was wonderful. I think the problem is what's happening today is that the communities that these migrants have created their own solutions. Yeah. And people then that come across today go to that community as the solution.
That's exactly, you're absolutely spot on. I think that's exactly what's happened. And we haven't got the cultural assimilation that Naomi, who blamed the government and said we should be more like Canada, which was extraordinary. But listen, David, I move on for no other reason. The news is coming on. Thank you for that. David in Glasgow starts us off.